The following is an original production of AZPM News.
For young girls, I would say just find your passion and work hard. And if you become very knowledgeable and you know that topic, you're going to succeed. Whether you're a man or a woman, you're going to succeed.
This is Speaking Personally, filmed on location at the Paul and Alice Baker Center for Public Media.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm Tom McNamara, and joining me today is a person who has a lot to do and had a lot to do with the growth and the success of public broadcasting over the years. The founding executive editor of the Nightly Business Report, which lasted for 20 years on PBS stations all around the country, very successful. You have run stations, you've been a CEO and executive all around the country. Meet Linda O'Brien, quite a resume. And while you were here, we wanted to sort of corral you and talk a little bit about your wonderful career and your success. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tom. It is great to be here.
We like to start from the beginning. So let me start from the very beginning. You're a little girl, and a lot of times you've been so successful in this realm, and a lot of times passion and careers are born very early in life, even before 5 years old. What was going on with Linda O'Brien at age 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8?
Well, I wasn't thinking about this career in particular,
yeah.
but there were some influences now that I think back on it that were very present. I grew up in a family of a mother and a grandmother, a working mom, and I grew up in Washington, D.C., so we were always at the dinner table talking about politics, about economics. So my mother had been a teacher turned government manager. My grandmother loved the stock market, and she would call her broker maybe 3 or 4 times a day because she wanted to know what her little portfolio of stocks were doing. Or she would go downtown to the local brokerage firm, a very small brokerage firm there, to watch the ticker tape. Just shows you how the technology's changed. She couldn't get the stocks on her. We didn't have cell phones then.
No.
But I would go with her from time to time, and I always heard her talking about her stocks. And she read the Wall Street Journal, and we talked about the influence of politics on the economy and on stocks. So I guess through maybe osmosis, I was picking all of this up, but I had no idea that I would ever go into business news, for example.
Yeah. Did she ever get you to break the piggy bank open and scoop it up and go down to the brokerage with her and try your luck?
Well,
at the market?
she did.
Yeah.
She did purchase stocks early on. I had AT&T. In those days they had the certificates.
Yeah.
And they were beautifully done, and I kept that for many, many years. So I guess from the time I was maybe 12, 13, I was an investor in that sense.
And what led you from that point? Because you kind of stayed on that track to a large degree. Take us from 12 years old, AT&T stock certificates hanging in your bedroom. Where did it go from there?
Well, I went to the University of Miami. I was actually going to major in biology, of all things, because I've always loved it. I love plants especially, and botany. But then it got into some of the intricate chemistry that you were required to do in math. So I said, well, let's see what else is out there. And I switched majors to journalism. And I've never looked back.
Yeah.
I absolutely fell in love with journalism. And in those days, I was print journalism, and I interned on the Miami News when I was a senior in college, and that was my first foray into interviewing, to writing, working with deadlines, and there's just such an energy about it.
Yeah.
And you learn so much. So I just loved the topic and have continued my whole life.
And you were doing general news then. You weren't doing business at this point.
Yes,
You were in the general mix.
Yes, general news. That's right.
And then once upon a time, then you segue. Tell us about that segue to this world that you literally just captured and molded and succeeded at.
Well, thank you. We had a great team. But I had been at WPBT, the South Florida PBS station, and I was news director at the time. And had started out as a producer reporter and then moved to news director. And the idea came from our senior management to do a business news program. And so they came to me and said, hey, would you like to head this up? And I said, sure. And we had not been doing daily news then. We were doing weekly projects and long form journalism, but nothing on a daily basis. So within about 8-10 weeks, we had Nightly Business Report up and running as a local program. Started out as 15 minutes and then went to a half hour. And then 2.5 years later, it became national. We marketed, we offered it up to the stations. They said, hey, this is a good idea. We'll take it. And so it was on PBS stations for many, many years.
And we want to take that further, much further. But if I can back up just a little bit, you were about to give birth with your first baby when management tapped you to give birth to this wonderful new nightly business program.
That's right.
Tell us about that segue.
Well, it was quite a time. I had just had my daughter. It was in September, and I think it was October. I was called in for a meeting, and that was the start of Nightly Business Report. We want to start this program, and what do we need to set it up? We had to figure out the staffing, the engineering part of it, because the station had never done a daily program. So it was a lot, but I don't know which was harder, being a new mom or giving birth to this new program. They were both pretty challenging, but somehow we made it through. And that's where family really matters, because my mother-in-law helped me take care of the baby. I had my mom, my aunt, a lot of people came in and helped get this thing going.
Nightly Business Report was born 1979. Now, this is way before any of the business channels, the full-time news, business news that we have now with, CNBC and Fox and CNN, and everybody's doing business news now. This was way before that. You were a true pioneer in a couple of senses, giving birth to this program. And as a woman, becoming not only the executive editor, but the anchor of a nightly business report, the proverbial glass ceiling.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was something, and I'm sure there were people who were saying, can a woman really do this? Because we were still in that era. There weren't that many women, especially in management in terms of news, but doing a business news program, it made sense. And we had co-anchor. I was a co-anchor, and we had a financial commentator. So it was a team. It really was. And it was a great team. And I think that's what made it work. I was just fortunate. It was a moment in time to work with a very talented group of people. And everybody was excited about the topic, because you're right, it had not been done. And one of the reasons we started, because we felt it was filling a need. It's interesting because now we're seeing oil prices. Well, we were coming off the big oil shocks.
Right.
And we were seeing spikes in interest rates. And when we would do interviews in the community, the economy would come up as the number one issue. And yet nobody was really doing that kind of in-depth coverage of it. And those were the days, if you wanted to know how the Dow Jones Industrial Average did, you had to wait till the next day, many cases. But there was radio, there were ways, but to really see the detail of your stocks, it was the next morning's newspaper. So we felt this is really filling a need. People want this information. More and more people were starting to invest, their retirement programs. They were looking at this as a necessary tool for their own financial education. So we just felt the timing was right. And, we didn't know what we didn't know.
Yeah.
You have a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, that kind of, we're going to make it happen. And we learned a lot. We interviewed a lot of people in the community who were investors, who were experts in the field. We ended up hiring a freelance reporter in Washington, because we felt that connection between the general economy and stocks and personal finance. There's a big through line there, and we wanted to make sure we always had that from the beginning. So even though we were local, we had that national element.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And in the broadcast business, as you know, there's a lot of imitation. If something works, we all want it, and it'll be swept in and started over here and over here and over here, be it commercial or public television. Do you feel as though you lit the fuse on what is now a phenomenal business universe, business news universe?
I feel very proud. We did break some new ground, absolutely. But I also think there's some really smart people over at CNBC, and Bloomberg later came on the scene. It would have evolved eventually, but I think it's great that it was on public media. And there have been other examples like that where they have tested out a program that others may not even consider, took the risk, because they didn't have to have those huge ratings. And so we were able to do it. And I guess in a way, maybe people did say, hey, they're doing it, they're making it work, there's interest, and who knows. But it was an important topic, and I'm just really pleased that it first emerged on public media.
You said before that, some in the broadcast world weren't sure, are we ready for a woman in this pretty much a male world still, 1979 in the business world. And you went on to interview people like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and all. Yes. How did they react to you? How did their enclaves react to you coming in?
Great. I mean, I never had any problems with that. I always felt that doing an interview, if you did your homework, you did your research, it showed, and they knew that, and so it was good. And the story about Warren Buffett was kind of unusual, because I had written him a letter and said we would like to cover the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, and he wrote back, yes, come on, just do it. And so I interviewed him. It was in the Orpheum Theater in Omaha. It got a whole lot bigger after that, but it was still rather small. And as I was interviewing, all these people were lining up behind us. But it turned out his father was a congressman, and he grew up in his teenage years in Washington, D.C. So we had both gone to the same high school. So you never know where you're going to find these connections. And so for years I'd go back and he'd say, oh, Woodrow Wilson High School. And you just learned so much from him. I sat in on many of the Berkshire Hathaway meetings, which were sometimes 3 hours of he and Charlie Munger mostly talking, and it was like going to a master's class in business. So it was fortunate that was fairly early into NBR's time. It was
Warren Buffett that urged you to interview Mrs. B, Rose Blumkin, a 100-year-old entrepreneur in her own business. And this seems like a pivotal moment in your career. What about that?
It was. It's still, it's amazing that you mentioned that, Tom, because it's still the best story that I ever covered. Because she was a force. She was 100 years old, and she ran this Nebraska Furniture Mart. And she used to go in a golf cart and just zip all around. This is a woman who came from Russia when she was a young girl, had no formal education beyond about 4th or 5th grade. She knew math really well. She could take the measurement of a carpet and figure out the square footage of what someone would need in her mind. And she used to always say, I came to this country, I'm always going to tell the truth, and I want to do this for my mother. She wanted to do something special. So she borrowed some money, family helped her, and she built this company that at the time was the largest furniture mart under one roof. And here she was, and still running it at 100 years old.
Linda, it sounds as though Warren Buffett may have been as taken with Rose Bumpkin as you were. Is that why he pointed you in her direction?
I think he really admired her entrepreneurship, and he supported. Nebraska Furniture Mart became a Berkshire Hathaway company. It was one of the companies that they owned. And so he supported what she did. And then there's a really interesting story, because I don't know exactly what happened, but she had a falling out with some of her family members. So she decided to take the company separate and
Okay.
start a new one across the street.
At 95 or
Probably.
years old? Yeah.
And it took Warren Buffett to kind of settle things down, bring her back into the fold. And when I interviewed him about it, and he said, and so I asked her to sign, I had her sign a non-compete, but it was only for 10 years. So he was a little worried that it might, who knows, it would run out.
And Warren Buffett and Rose Bumpkin, so much alike, both of them with tremendous longevity, success, and wisdom.
Yes, that's right.
You know?
That's right. And very sharp minds. I mean, just Warren Buffett was able from a very young age to go into these stock prices and see the numbers. And he still loves to read annual reports and everything he can get his hands on. So it's that diving into a topic in the same way she was in the furniture business. But it's that passion for the subject matter.
And you know, there's a little Rose Blumpkin in you with all that
well,
you
thank
did
you.
then. You left the air eventually. You were successful on air for about 12 years, hosting the program.
I did that daily for 12 years, and then I would do occasional pieces and
and then you left the air, and they couldn't get enough of you in the corporate suite. So what would Rose learn from you about doing what you do?
Keep learning. Just keep going. You know, there's just other avenues. I loved NBR, but an opportunity came up to go to San Francisco. And part of the reason I did that is we had covered so many high-tech companies. It was, you know, the days of Apple Computer, and while I was there, Twitter actually emerged. All these things were happening, and it was just an interesting time. And I thought, I want to branch out and learn about a different community, a different public station. And so I went there and was chief content officer. And then I was learning a lot more about management. Even though I had been executive editor, this was a broader skill set of managing radio, television, engineering. I mean, it was a big group, and it's a very large station. So I just felt it was a learning experience. And I love that. And then later, after that, went back to the East Coast to South Carolina and became the CEO of the South Carolina Network.
That's right. You read about that. So you were there, you learned, you succeeded. What imprint do you feel you've left on everything from the nascent nightly business report all the way to California and South Carolina? And even now you're doing some executive recruiting for PBS. Now, what's the print, the bonus, the positives that you've put on PBS, you think?
Well, I would say it's more the reverse. It's what PBS has done for me. I really feel blessed to have worked in an environment where you could create a program like Nightly Business Report, where you could expand in an area that you have a passion for, and you have great mentors. All the way along my career, I had mentors, both at the stations and then at the system at large, where you work with people, you go to conferences, you learn about what other stations are doing, and it's just a growing opportunity. So I think it's more of that. If I've added something to it, it's really perseverance. Just keep doing it, which is, when I think about my grandkids, you know, and I see that there's challenges, and you just have to keep doing it. And I've had my challenges in my life, and I've kept doing it.
Yeah. Was it tougher to be a CEO in your PBS life, answering to a board, or was it tougher being that on-air person, that executive producer, director every night with the programming?
I would say in South Carolina, it was pretty tough because it was complex. It was a state network, so we had a commission, but we also were funded. We had a large amount of funding from the state legislature. So you had to present every year your budget, which wasn't easy, and also do all the other things that CEOs do in the community with your staff. It's just very multifaceted. And it was challenging. I guess with Nightly Business Report, I loved it, and it had its own challenges, and you were always learning because of the topic, and things
Right.
would change and all of that.
Yeah.
But running a station takes a lot. Well, at least at that stage, because I hadn't done it before.
Sure.
But I felt like we did achieve a lot, and we were under some serious challenges in those years, those early years, because it was coming off of the recession, 2008.
Yeah.
And there were cutbacks, but we really communicated what public media does for the state.
During your time in South Carolina, there's a story that really illustrates the importance of public broadcasting to the vast majority of this country.
Yes, because South Carolina, like a lot of other states, has many rural areas where people did not, and still in many cases do not have high-speed internet, could not afford Wi-Fi, could not afford the kinds of programming that you see on other parts of the dial. So they really relied on public media, television and radio, for education, for emergency community alerts. And this fact came home to me when I went to Orangeburg, South Carolina, and we were visiting schools, and we visited a library, and it was after school, early evening, and parents were literally driving up to be in the parking lot outside the library so they could get the Wi-Fi signal into their cars, because the kids had to do their homework on their computer and they didn't have that at home. And so you realize how important public broadcasting is, because that is the big communication link. It's not just the programming, which is very important, but it's also the education and the infrastructure that serves the whole state. So we were able to communicate that, and I think that was maybe a contribution I at least helped to be able to, when people were skeptical, why should we be funding this? Well, there's a really important reason, and people depend on public media, and to be able to tell that story was important, especially at that time.
Yeah. I'll ask you to keep your CEO hat on for a moment. And I say this in a positive sense. PBS, I think, has the reputation of, moving a little more slowly, but going deeper and spreading out wider at its own pace. And now we're in this digital world that has morphed the commercial television and news and business at warp speed and all. How do you think PBS can manage and compete in this new digital age?
I think PBS is doing really well in this area. I mean, early on, when you think of the PBS digital studios, when you think of some of the work 10, 15 years ago that was moving into this. When I was at KQED, we were doing multi-platform. We had a whole initiative on science that was looking at radio, television, digital, and education. So there has been this emphasis on research and development that I have seen throughout my career at public media to really push the innovation. And I think that'll just continue and we'll grow into it. And yes, broadcasting is extremely important to what we do. But look at all the platforms. Look at this station doing podcasts, doing streaming, all these different forms of communication. It's very exciting to see, because then you're reaching viewers and listeners where they are.
So we're going to be okay.
We're going to be okay. I'm absolutely convinced.
In your view, we're keeping pace too.
I do think we are. Yes,
as other
absolutely. I
places
mean,
are.
you think of people are consuming more streaming. Passport has been available for some time. People are getting more and more used to it. It's getting better to use, and a lot of people are going to that. And look at NPR with the short segments, the NPR One, where you can get lots of news very quickly, and then it's almost tailored to what you want. So these were things that were being done 10 years ago or more.
Let me go full circle and bring you back to 12-year-old Linda, and 12 years old, and you're tromping down to the brokerage with your grandmother and all. What, having done all you've done in your career And, we always talk about the glass ceiling and all, but what would you say to 12-year-old girls today moving forward in this land of digital and AI?
I guess when I was about 12 years old, I read this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, which was, "Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm." And that has sort of been guiding me my whole life.
Yeah.
I saw it with my mother and my grandmother, how they worked really hard, and that work ethic became part of who I am. But also there was great joy in learning. And my grandmother used to always say, education is the most important thing. So for young girls, I would say just find your passion and work hard, but really take education seriously. It's a gift, and it's something that no one will ever take it away from you. And if you become very knowledgeable and you know that topic, you're going to succeed. Whether you're a man or a woman, you're going to succeed.
And what about Linda, the risk taker? Certainly.
You have to take some risks, absolutely, because that's how you make some gains. And yes, sometimes it's not going to work, and then you move on. And that's another thing I love about public media, that you have the opportunity to do some research and development and try some things. And then if it doesn't work, go on to something else.
What was your biggest risk looking back in the whole span of career?
Well, definitely Nightly Business Report, because we just hadn't, you just didn't know how it was going to be accepted. We were putting all of this together. We used to do the format. We would write it out on a board, a whiteboard, and how long should we decide on this topic and that, and how to put it all together, and will it make sense, and will people be interested? It was a risk, and I have to hand it to the station management. Let us go forward to do this, and helped us with the budget, because in those days we didn't really have its own budget. It was in the middle of the fiscal year. And so we put together a core group and then later brought in some other folks. But there was a risk, absolutely.
I hereby put you on the Mount Rushmore of business news. Linda, I think you've earned it. Who's up there with you?
Well, we talked about Louis Rukeyser, was wonderful. Maryland Public Television really pioneered stock investing, the weekly programs that he's done. I would say some of the people from the Wall Street Journal who have really made their mark. I would say Michael Bloomberg. I mean, what he did to advance business news on a multi-platform level is early on is really incredible. So there have been some great strides in this whole world of business news.
Linda, we want to let everyone know about a pretty cool thing you're involved in right here at AZPM, which is called Navigating Our Financial Times. With your expertise, tell us about that.
Yes, I am working with Nicole Cox and Ann Simmons of Bodan Zachary on a podcast that looks at business and financial news. So I feel like I'm kind of coming full circle, and I really am enjoying it, because there are so many great stories and how the economy is affecting people's personal finances. We've looked at healthcare, housing. We've looked at financial scams. So we've really covered the gamut of broadly personal finance and business news.
So long after your years on Nightly Business Report, we're pulling you back on the air.
I thought, I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've done that, but I guess it is a little like riding a bicycle. I'm getting back on anyway, and it's been fun.
Congratulations on all the success and on a wonderful life, well lived in the halls of PBS, here, there, and everywhere.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Linda. And thank you for joining us for Speaking Personally. I'm Tom McNamara. We'll see you next time.